I began this book aboard the Ethelred, with the islands still under the horizon and a science journal open on the cockpit table, because I wanted the reader to know from the first page that the man writing it had spent 17 volumes as the friend of the outsider, and that this one would ask something of him he had never yet asked of himself. For 17 books, I cross-examined the consensus of professional cosmology as the largest and best-funded witness in the room. Here, for once, I let that witness testify without interruption. This is the case for the defense, made at full strength in the model's own voice, and graded, as everything in this quest is graded, not by how it flatters my instincts, but by what the evidence will bear. I keep the same registers I have always kept. Established science for what is replicated and quantitatively understood, contested but serious for what working cosmologists still fight over in good faith, a speculative bridge for the links that are plausible but not yet demonstrated, and a plainer verdict still for the claims the evidence will simply not carry. The finding of this volume, which I will not soften to keep the reader's sympathy, is that most of what I report here wears the highest of those grades. Built up fairly, on its own terms, the Standard Model is not the fragile, overfitted contraption its critics describe. It is quantitative, predictive, and, the word is exact, astonishing. I build it in 7 movements. The first lays the geometry. Everything begins with the cosmological principle, the working assumption that on the largest scales the universe is the same everywhere and in every direction, and I try to show how much that single idea buys. From it comes the FLRW metric, which encodes an entire cosmos in a single line of mathematics, and from the metric come the Friedmann equations, which turn that frozen geometry into a history, a universe that expands or contracts according to what it is made of. I tally that content with the omega parameters, the bookkeeping of matter and radiation, and the dark energy that sets the balance. And I insist, against a confusion the series' own earlier volumes sometimes let stand, that the expansion is not galaxies flying apart through space, but space itself unfolding between them. Getting that distinction right dissolves half the objections a newcomer instinctively raises, and it makes everything after it legible. The second movement follows the hot Big Bang through its first 3 minutes to the forging of the light elements, the first of the 3 great pillars. From a single number, the density of ordinary matter, the theory predicts how much hydrogen, helium, and lithium the young universe should have cooked, and the measured abundances match across an enormous range. I walk the delicate physics that sets the outcome: neutron freeze-out, the deuterium bottleneck, recombination, and the surface of last scattering. And then I face, squarely, the place where the pillar strains. The lithium the model predicts is stubbornly more than the oldest stars contain, and the disagreement has not gone away. I mark the triumph as established and the lithium problem as a genuine, unresolved crack, because a pillar is best judged by how it bears the weight that tests it, not by how it looks when nothing is leaning on it. The third movement takes up the microwave background, the second pillar, and perhaps the mightiest thing in all of cosmology. I tell the story from Penzias and Wilson, the afterglow of creation mistaken for noise, to the precision maps of Planck, and then I anatomize the faint pattern of hot and cold spots it carries. Those spots are not random. They are a spectrum of acoustic peaks, the frozen ringing of the primordial plasma shaped by baryon loading and silk damping and the long fall of light out of gravity's wells. Here I owe the series' own thread its honest place. This music is literally the sound of a cooling plasma, the electric and the thermal woven into the model's single most quantitative measurement. Not a rival to this cosmology, but load-bearing within it. The pattern of those peaks fixes 6 numbers, and 6 numbers specify the entire Standard Model. that a photograph of the sky as it was 400,000 years after the beginning should pin down the composition, geometry, and age of the whole universe to the percent is, I argue, the most convincing thing in the field. A theory that fit each measurement with its own free knob would impress no one. A theory that fits the microwave sky, the element abundances, the galaxy surveys, and the supernova distances all at once, with 6, is doing something a caricature cannot. The fourth movement climbs the cosmic distance ladder rung by careful rung, parallax, Cepheids, and the Type Ia supernovae that revealed to their own discoverers astonishment that the expansion is accelerating under a dark energy no one can yet explain. I add the newer rungs, the baryon acoustic oscillations printed into the clustering of galaxies and the standard sirens of merging neutron stars that read distance straight from a gravitational wave. And then I confront the crack now running through the whole structure, the Hubble tension, the persistent refusal of the expansion rate measured near at hand to agree with the rate inferred from the distant microwave sky. I lay out both measurements at full strength and refuse to prejudge which will give. This is contested but serious in the truest sense. Precisely the kind of tension from which either new physics or a hard lesson in measurement eventually emerges. I will not pretend to know which, and I will not let the reader think the model's defenders know either. The fifth movement grows the cosmic web from the faintest ripples in the early universe into the vast filaments and voids we map today. I follow it in both registers at once. The great N-body simulations that grow model universes in silico, and the real surveys that chart the actual one. On large scales, their agreement is a quiet triumph, and I grade it as such. But I report just as plainly the standard model's small-scale headaches, the places where simulation and observation of individual galaxies do not yet cleanly match, and the messy, unfinished physics of galaxy formation itself, where feedback from black holes and the magnetic fields threaded through the gas still do work no one has fully tamed. This is the honest frontier of the model, not its triumphant core, and I keep the two carefully distinct so the reader never mistakes a region of active argument for one of settled fact, nor the reverse. The sixth movement follows the first light into the dark ages and the cosmic dawn, the long dark after the microwave background went quiet, the lighting of the first stars, and the Ryanization that followed. This is the model's growing edge, the epoch from which the next decade of data will come, above all through the 21-centimeter line of neutral hydrogen. I mark clearly which of it is established and which is still a promissory note, because that difference is exactly what a fair juror must track when a frontier is only beginning to open. The seventh movement renders the verdict this book was written to earn, an accounting of what the standard model gets right, and the accounting is humbling for a series that began as the consensus's cross-examiner, assembling the three pillars in order, watching independent measurements of different epochs, made by different people with different instruments, fall onto the same 6 numbers. I found the distance harder and harder to keep. I will be candid. I began this book as a duty and expected to come away respecting the model while keeping my distance, and that is not what happened. By the closing chapter, I had, against my own long instinct, been substantially persuaded. I record it not as a conversion to be trusted on my say-so, but as data. This is what the evidence did to a reader predisposed to resist it. This is the first movement of a 3-volume conclusion, and I have handed the honest seams forward on purpose. The lithium, the Hubble tension, the small-scale web, the 95% of the universe we can weigh but cannot name. The witness has now testified at full strength. Only a case made that way is worth a verdict, and a verdict is what these closing books owe. Following the evidence toward the mainstream where it genuinely leads is not a betrayal of the method. It is the method.